Welcome to the talk I'm giving here. It is based on this book which I wrote and was published in April 2016, entitled Recollections and Reflections, the British Journey of One African Priest. Now, what is the book all about? I served as a Catholic priest for 25 years, but I left the priesthood on 13th October 2014. The book is basically an endeavor to address that situation, that development. What is it that led to my taking the decision to leave priesthood? Now, obviously, this was a very major decision in my life. I'm sure many across the world will recognize that. Anybody who takes a major decision in their life does so not simply for a single factor. There are usually several, sometimes even many factors that surround a single major decision one takes in their life. And so the same applies to this decision that I took in 2014. Now, why am I sharing my story about my leaving priesthood in this book? I am doing so because I firmly believe that it is of great benefit to many priests, many Catholic priests across the world, both those who are in active ministry as well as those who, like me, have also left. I firmly believe it is of great benefit to all those who are in religious vocations. Again, both those who are still actively living out their vocation as well as those who have left. Next, I believe it is of great benefit to the millions of lay Catholics across the world in terms of providing some small eye-opener to them of some of the things that go on within the church, some of the things that priests or nuns or whoever is in a committed position in the church, some of the experiences that they go through, sometimes at the hands of fellow nuns who may be in office, at the hands of fellow priests, at the hands of, as in my case, even a bishop. Finally, I believe my story about this phase of my priesthood in which I served within the country of Britain is of benefit to just people in general, whether members of any given church or those who are not members of any given church, as they reflect on relationships where commitment is involved, authority is involved, and so on. So, the thing is, when I originally came to Britain, I came over in 1996, August, to undertake further studies. During that year, from August until August 1996 until June 1997, I studied a master's degree in systematic theology, which I successfully completed. At the end of that academic year, on the basis of the strong recommendation of one of my lecturers, my then bishop, the late Archbishop Chakaipa, agreed to give me an opportunity to go even further and pursue PhD studies. So began that further journey from 1997, and I completed the studies in 2002, although the degree was issued to me in April 2003. There was an unfortunate development during the course of this latter phase of my studies. I developed chronic renal failure. This obviously impacted on the period it took me to complete my PhD degree. Those who are aware of what goes on when one suffers renal failure, it can be gravely incapacitating. In my case, the experiences I went through because of renal failure started from undergoing hemodialysis, then next moving on to CAPD, which is continuous ambulatory peritoneal dialysis, and then finally I was fortunate enough to have a sibling who was prepared to offer her own kidney to me, and a transplant was subsequently undertaken. And so that restored a bit of health, a good bit of health to me. However, even if one gets their health restored after a transplant, there is always need for continued medication after that transplant. Otherwise, the transplanted organ will fail. So, what has this to do then with my living priesthood? The connection is that when I completed my studies, my PhD studies in 2002, and as I said, the degree was awarded in 2003, the month of April. By that time, my bishop had passed away in Zimbabwe. And because I had to have this continuing medical treatment, the supply of medication, that meant, in my judgment, it was necessary to stay on in Britain after that completion of my studies. But then this involved, obviously, as a priest, having to deal with the hierarchy in the church. So I wrote a letter to the then administrator of my diocese, the now late Monsignor Kizito Membere, asking him for permission that I stay on in Britain. Because the issue was, if I went back home with the nature, the state of the health system at home in Zimbabwe, that would have meant only one thing, suicide. So it meant it was necessary for me to stay on. So anyway, the Monsignor Kizito Membere kindly agreed and wrote a letter giving me, asking for permission from the Archdiocese of Westminster for me to stay on. So in the meantime, I decided to apply for a teaching post because I reasoned the fundamental condition for my stay in the Archdiocese of Westminster was that I should not become a financial liability to them. I should not depend on them for my welfare, for clothing, for transport, for food, and so on. Even for books, as somebody who had done such studies, I still needed to purchase books to keep up to date. So I needed to have some income. I couldn't depend on my diocese at home, which was itself in a financial strain like any other organization in Zimbabwe at the time. So I applied for this teaching post, and as it turned out, I was granted. I got the post at one of the Catholic schools in the diocese. Now, news of this reached the one auxiliary bishop of Westminster, who was in charge of immigrant priests, and he summoned me to his office, querying in a very angry tone and state of mind why I had gone ahead to apply for this teaching post. I explained to him that I needed to stay on in Britain, and I had already asked for permission through my Vicar General, the administrator of my diocese, to stay on in the country. And he then brought up this huge issue of saying what I had done was illegal, and because I had come to study, not to work, so it was a criminal act, the very act of applying for this teaching post. And then I had also undertaken other illegal actions, such as receiving treatment from the NHS. And he had discovered by then that I had founded the Zimbabwean Catholic community in England and Wales. So all these things, in his view, they were illegal actions, and actions that indicated I was doing things of my own accord. I did not listen or kind of subject myself to authority, to church authority. So anyway, regardless of that, he gave me a go-ahead to start working as a teacher. And I taught in the school for 2 years, and then for the rest, I served as a chaplain in that same school. Now, however, because of this very situation, my relationship with this bishop and the Diocese of Westminster, I should say, completely broke down, because this negative attitude then built up from that day until it came to a crux in 2008. Each time that I went to see this bishop, he would be asking me, among other things, when I would recover my health and would be ready to go back to Zimbabwe. And each time I would be telling him that there was no way I could recover from renal failure. I would still need treatment all my life. But I even got letters from medical teams to write to him, to explain to him, but he would not cease asking the same question over and over again each time he called me over to him. Now, with regard to the Zimbabwean Catholic community, he asked me how this organization was functioning, whether it had a viable structure and viable finances. I explained to him the way I had set it up and the way it was functioning, and he was happy with it. But he told me that when the time came to appoint an official chaplain, it would not be myself. It would have to be somebody appointed straight from Zimbabwe to replace me, because I did not come to Britain to be a chaplain to Zimbabweans. I came to study, and I should stick to that kind of goal, to that purpose. These kind of views were rather strange to me, because there are many immigrants in Britain who originally came to study, and they have been recognized by different organizations which appreciate the service they can offer, and they have gone on to live long-term in the country, giving service to different departments of the country. With regard to kind of saying it was illegal for me to get a teaching post, it's strange, because it was the government that would decide whether to give me a post or not, and they gave me that post. Receiving treatment from the NHS as illegal, that was strange to me as well, because actually by working and earning an income, I would then be contributing through my national insurance towards my treatment. So they were rather strange kind of sentiments and attitudes in my view. Of course, I may be wrong. If asked himself, he might express a different view. However, with this attitude that I should not be the official chaplain myself, when eventually the official chaplain was appointed, he came over and lived in the same house as myself. Then the bishop happened to travel abroad at a time when I needed a support letter for the renewal of my visa in 2008. He left me an email to the effect that the Vicar General of the diocese would see to that issue. So on the 28th July, I went to see this Vicar General, and we met up, and it was a very kind of sad, a very unfortunate, a very painful experience for me. He was very angry with me and told me that the whole diocese was angry with me because of the issues that the bishop, this auxiliary bishop, had raised before. And then finally, because he said somebody had been appointed to be Zimbabwean chaplain in my case, in my place, so that meant I no longer had work to do. Besides that, I had overstayed in the country. It was time I should be packing my bags to go back to Zimbabwe. This priest who had replaced me, he continued, was not only going to live in the same house as myself, but he was going to take over my room itself. And he ended with the words then, "There is no room for you at the inn." At that point, I had literally to beg for my stay, almost like a prisoner on death row. When eventually, some weeks down the line, there was a kind priest who agreed to offer me accommodation. I made up my mind that I should start making plans to leave the priesthood. That would be the only way I would be able to live on for whatever period, whatever number of years God still wanted me to be alive. And so when the 13th October 2014 arrived, my mind had been made up and I had made arrangements. I left priesthood, and the rest is history, as they say. Thank you very much for listening to this talk. God bless you.